The scent of lavender oil and beeswax clung to my fingertips as I polished the mahogany banister leading to the king's private chambers. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet, and the palace corridors remained draped in that peculiar blue-gray light that made everything feel suspended between dreaming and waking. I preferred these hours, the quiet ones, before the court awakened and remembered I existed only to be invisible. My hands moved in practice circles, the same motion I'd performed every morning for 3 years. Back and forth. Breathe in the sharp medicinal smell of wood polish. Breathe out the anxiety that lived permanently in my chest. The cloth made a soft whisking sound against the grain, almost musical in the silence. I was good at being invisible. It was a skill I'd honed since childhood, back in the servants' quarters of my mother's employer's estate. She used to tell me that girls like us, with hair too pale, eyes too large, frames too slight, we survived by becoming wallpaper. Background, forgettable. The loudest nail gets hammered down, Elise, she'd whispered once, braiding my wheat-colored hair before bed. But the quiet one holds the whole house together. I'd believed her. I'd made myself into shadow and silence. The sound of a door opening above startled me so badly I nearly dropped the polish tin. It clattered against the step, the noise obscenely loud in the morning hush. My heart hammered as heavy footsteps descended the staircase. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes down, every muscle locked in the practiced posture of deference. King Rowan Ashford appeared around the landing, still fastening the cuff of his black shirt. He moved with that terrible, predatory grace all alphas possessed, the kind that made your hindbrain scream warnings, even when your rational mind knew you were safe. Probably safe. The morning light caught the dark auburn of his hair, touched the sharp angles of his face, made his amber eyes almost luminous. He paused when he saw me, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for something to shift in the air between us. "You're here early," he said. His voice was deep, textured like smoke over gravel. "Every morning, Your Majesty," I managed, keeping my gaze fixed on his boots, black leather, expensive, meticulously maintained. "Same time." A sound that could have meant anything. "I don't usually see you. That's the point," I thought, but obviously didn't say. Instead, "I try not to disturb Your Majesty." Silence stretched. My pulse thudded in my ears. What was the protocol here? Should I leave? Stay frozen? The palace's endless rules suddenly seemed useless, providing no guidance for this particular scenario. "What's your name?" The question shocked me so thoroughly I forgot to breathe for a moment. 3 years I'd worked in these halls. 3 years of scrubbing floors and changing linens and polishing silver. And the king had never once asked my name. "Elise, Your Majesty." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Elise Thorne. Elise." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting each syllable. Something about the way he said it made heat crawl up my neck. "You always work alone?" "Yes, Your Majesty. I prefer the early shift. It's quieter." "You don't like crowds." It wasn't a question. I risked a glance upward and immediately regretted it. His eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that felt physical, like pressure against my skin. There was something hungry in that gaze, something that made my breath catch for reasons I didn't want to examine. "The court can be overwhelming, Your Majesty," I said carefully. One corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Diplomatic answer. He took a step down, closing the distance between us. I fought the urge to retreat, but you're right. They're vultures, most of them, always circling, looking for weakness. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. My mother's advice echoed. Silence is safer than the wrong words. "You're afraid of me," he observed. I started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point of lying to someone who could probably hear my heartbeat from where he stood? "I'm afraid of many things, Your Majesty. But especially me. You're the king." As if that explained everything. Maybe it did. He was closer now. Near enough that I could smell cedar and something wilder. Something that my hindbrain recognized even if I couldn't name it. Alpha. Predator. Danger. "Do you know what I think, Elise?" His voice had dropped lower, intimate in a way that made my stomach flutter. "I think you're the only person in this entire palace who doesn't want something from me. You don't angle for my attention or engineer meetings in corridors. You just exist. Quietly. Like you're trying to disappear." My throat had gone dry. I'm just doing my job, Your Majesty. Are you happy? The question was so unexpected, so genuinely curious, that I actually looked at him fully. His expression was unreadable, but those amber eyes were focused on me with an attention that felt like standing in sunlight after years in shadow. What did happiness even mean for someone like me? I'm content, Your Majesty. Liar. But he said it gently, without accusation. You're surviving. There's a difference. Before I could formulate a response, voices echoed from the floor below, other servants beginning their morning routines. The spell, whatever it had been, shattered. King Rowan straightened, his expression shifting back into the cool mask I recognized from seeing him at formal functions. Continue your work, Elise. He descended past me, his arm brushing mine for just a second. Brief contact that somehow felt deliberate. And perhaps, don't try quite so hard to be invisible. Some of us appreciate the view. Then he was gone, disappearing into the depths of the palace, leaving me standing there with my heart racing and my carefully constructed invisibility feeling suddenly, dangerously inadequate. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that brief, impossible conversation on a darkened staircase, had already changed everything. The rest of that day felt surreal, like I was moving through water. I scrubbed floors in the eastern wing, replaced linens in the guest chambers, polished silver in the dining hall. Normal tasks. Routine. But my mind kept returning to those amber eyes, that low voice asking if I was happy. No one had ever asked me that before. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the entire interaction. Kings didn't notice maids. They certainly didn't engage them in philosophical discussions about happiness and survival. It had probably been a moment of boredom on his part, a brief curiosity about the invisible people who maintained his world. But 3 days later, he was there again. Same staircase, same pre-dawn light. This time I'd heard him coming and had already pressed myself against the wall, eyes down, the very picture of servant propriety. Good morning, Elise. My name in his mouth still felt strange. Intimate. Your Majesty. I kept my voice neutral, professional. I've been thinking about your answer, about contentment versus happiness. This was dangerous territory. I could feel it the way you feel a storm building on the horizon. Your Majesty, do you ever want more than this? He gestured vaguely at the palace around us. More than polishing and cleaning and making yourself small? The question scraped against something raw inside me. What I want is irrelevant, Your Majesty. This is my place. Who decided that? The world did. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. I bit my lip, waiting for his anger, but it didn't come. Instead, he laughed. A short, bitter sound. Yes, the world decides many things for us, doesn't it? Birth, rank, destiny, all predetermined. There was something in his voice, some edge of pain or frustration, that made me brave. Or stupid. You're the king. You can change anything you want, can I? His eyes met mine, and in that gaze I saw something unexpected. Loneliness. The kind that echoed my own. You'd be surprised how little freedom comes with a crown, Elise, how many choices aren't really choices at all. We stood there in the half-light, king and maid, separated by every law and custom our world possessed, yet somehow sharing a moment of raw honesty that felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years. Why are you talking to me? The question escaped before I could stop it. He tilted his head, considering. Because you don't lie to me about being content. Because you understand what it means to survive instead of live. Because... He paused, something flickering across his features. Because when I look at you, I see someone real in a palace full of masks. My breath caught. This was dangerous. This was so far beyond dangerous that I didn't have words for it. I should go, I whispered. This isn't appropriate. No, he agreed. It isn't. But neither of us moved. The sound of footsteps approaching, actual footsteps this time, not imagined, broke the moment. I grabbed my cleaning supplies and fled down the corridor, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Behind me, I heard him say softly, almost too quiet to catch. Run if you need to, little ghost, but I see you now, and I won't forget. I didn't look back, but I felt his gaze on me all the same, heavy as a promise, and twice as terrifying. The encounters became a pattern I couldn't break, no matter how hard I tried to avoid them. I changed my schedule, arriving earlier, then later, even attempting the afternoon shift once. But somehow, King Rowan always found me. In the library as I dusted shelves, where he'd appear with a book he claimed to need. In the portrait gallery where I cleaned frames, materializing from the shadows to ask my opinion on long-dead ancestors. Once, memorably, in the palace gardens where I'd been sent to help with the spring pruning. "You're persistent at avoiding me," he'd said that day, leaning against a stone fountain while I pretended to be fascinated by rose bushes. "It's almost impressive. I'm not avoiding you, Your Majesty. I'm working." "Liar." That word again, said with something almost like affection. "You know what I think? I think you're afraid of what happens if you stop running." He was right, of course, but I couldn't tell him that. What I also couldn't tell him was that I'd begun to notice things. The way his jaw tightened when members of his council spoke over each other in the corridors, their voices carrying into rooms where I worked invisible in corners. The exhaustion that lived in the set of his shoulders during late-night meetings, visible through half-open doors, the loneliness that radiated from him in waves during formal dinners, surrounded by hundreds yet utterly alone. I recognized that loneliness. It matched my own. 6 weeks after our first conversation, everything shifted. I'd been assigned to clean the king's private study, a task usually reserved for the head housekeeper, but she'd fallen ill, and I was the only one trusted with the king's personal spaces. My hands had trembled as I'd entered that masculine sanctuary with its leather chairs, wall-to-wall books, and massive oak desk. I was polishing the window overlooking the training grounds when I heard the door open behind me. "I wondered when they'd send you here," King Rowan said. I spun, nearly dropping my cloth. He stood in the doorway, still in training clothes, his hair damp with sweat. There was something different in his expression today. Something determined and almost reckless. "Your Majesty, I can come back." "No." He closed the door. The soft click felt impossibly loud. "Stay." Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to remember my place, but my feet remained rooted to the floor as he crossed the room toward me. "Do you know what tomorrow is, Elise?" I shook my head mutely. "The spring solstice. The council has arranged for suitable Omega females from noble families to attend the traditional selection ceremony. I'm expected to choose a queen." His voice was flat, emotionless. "To produce an heir, to secure the bloodline." My stomach twisted painfully. That's good, Your Majesty. The kingdom needs... I don't want any of them." He was close now. Close enough that I could see gold flecks in his amber eyes. "I haven't wanted any of them since the moment I asked your name on that staircase." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "You can't... I'm not... This is... impossible?" A bitter smile. "Yes. Everything about this is impossible. You're a maid. I'm a king. The council would riot. The noble families would revolt. Every law and tradition says this can't happen." "Then it can't," I whispered, even as my heart shattered saying the words. "Your Majesty, please, this is just... It's just loneliness. You'll choose someone appropriate tomorrow and forget." His hand came up, fingers gentle against my jaw, tilting my face to his. "I have never been less lonely than in these stolen moments with you, and I will never forget. This will destroy me," I said, and hated how my voice broke. "When this ends, because it has to end, it will destroy me. Then let me give you something first." His thumb traced my lower lip. "One night. One real thing in a lifetime of pretending. No titles, no crowns, just you and me." I should have said no. Should have remembered my mother's warnings. Should have thought about consequences. Should have protected the fragile safety I'd built. Instead, I breathed. "Yes." What happened that night changed everything, though I didn't understand how completely until weeks later. He was gentle in ways I hadn't expected, reverent in ways that made my chest ache. We talked for hours in the darkness of his chambers, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd never trusted anyone else to hold. He told me about the weight of expectations, about becoming king at 19 after his father's sudden death, about the crushing isolation of power. I told him about my mother, about learning to disappear, about the particular pain of being invisible in a world full of people. "You're the most visible thing in my world," he'd whispered against my hair. "You burn like a candle in a dark room." When dawn approached, reality returned with it. "They'll expect you to choose today," I said, already pulling away, already rebuilding my walls. "I know." His voice was hollow. and you'll have to choose someone appropriate. Someone who can be queen. I know that too. I dressed in silence, my maid's uniform feeling like armor and prison combined. At the door, I paused. Thank you, Your Majesty, for making me feel real, even if just for a night. Elise. But I was already gone, fleeing back to the servants' quarters before courage failed me entirely. The selection ceremony was held in the Grand Hall. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd volunteered to help serve refreshments, needing to see it with my own eyes, needing the pain to make it real. 12 Omega women stood in a perfect line, each one beautiful, accomplished, appropriate. Lady Serena of House Northmere, with her midnight hair and cunning eyes. Lady Helena of House Riverstone, graceful as water. Lady Cassandra of House Waverley, whose bloodline traced back to the first kings. I stood in the shadows with my tray, invisible again, watching King Rowan move down the line with mechanical politeness. His face was the perfect mask. Royal, distant, untouchable. Nothing like the man who'd held me hours before. The council members whispered among themselves, placing bets on his choice. The noble families preened, already imagining their daughters wearing the crown. King Rowan reached the end of the line. Turned. His eyes swept the room and landed impossibly on me. Time stopped. I've made my decision, he announced, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. But first, the council should know something. Lord Garrett, the head counselor, stepped forward. Yes, Your Majesty? There will be no selection today. There will be no appropriate match from the noble families. He was still looking at me, his gaze burning. Because I've already chosen, chaos erupted. Voices shouting, noble families demanding explanations, the Omega candidates crying out in protest. But King Rowan just smiled, a dangerous, possessive smile that made my blood run cold and hot simultaneously. Her name is Elise Thorne, he continued, voice cutting through the noise. And she will be my queen. The tray slipped from my nerveless fingers, crashing to the marble floor. Every eye in the room turned to me. The invisible maid suddenly thrust into blinding spotlight. This is madness, Lord Garrett sputtered. She's nobody, a servant. You cannot seriously... I can and I will. King Rowan's tone brooked no argument. The decision is made. He crossed the room toward me, each step echoing in the shocked silence. When he reached me, he extended his hand. You said it would destroy you when this ended, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear, so I'm making sure it never ends. You're mine, Elise. Forever, my mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. This was a fever dream, a delusion, Your Majesty, I breathed. What have you done? His smile turned tender, but his eyes held a fierceness that stole my breath. What I should have done the moment I learned your name. I chose you. Now choose me back. Around us, the court exploded into arguments. The noble families were demanding audiences, the council members calling for emergency sessions, the spurned Omega candidates fleeing in tears and rage. But in that moment, with his hand extended and my entire world tilting on its axis, there was only one answer I could give. I placed my palm in his, feeling his fingers close around mine with a possessiveness that should have frightened me, but instead felt like coming home. I choose you, I whispered, and the palace would never be the same. The following days passed in a blur of chaos and transformation that left me reeling. I was moved from the servants' quarters to a guest suite in the royal wing, temporary quarters, they said, until proper chambers could be prepared. The room alone was larger than any space I'd ever inhabited, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens and furniture that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I stood at those windows for hours, watching the world below, and trying to understand how my life had shattered and rebuilt itself in the span of a single afternoon. The palace buzzed with scandal. Servants who'd once worked alongside me now curtsied when I passed, their eyes filled with confusion and resentment. The noble families refused to acknowledge me, treating me as if I were invisible again, but this time the invisibility felt like a weapon rather than protection. And the council was another matter entirely. You cannot do this, Your Majesty. Lord Garrett insisted during the emergency session I'd been summoned to attend. I sat beside King Rowan in the council chamber, acutely aware of how my simple dress contrasted with the elaborate gowns the spurned Omega candidates would have worn. The girl has no bloodline, no training, no political connections. She cannot possibly serve as queen. Elise, King Rowan corrected coolly. Her name is Elise, and she will serve as my queen because I have chosen her. But the kingdom requires a king who rules with clarity and purpose. His hand found mine beneath the table, squeezing gently. For the first time in my reign, I have both. Question my choice again, and I'll question your position on this council. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lord Garrett's face purpled, but he fell silent. Lady Cordelia, the only female council member, leaned forward with calculating eyes. And if the girl proves unsuitable, if she cannot handle the pressures of court life, then I will fail with her, King Rowan said simply, but I won't succeed without her. The declaration should have filled me with warmth. Instead, it terrified me. He was staking his entire reign on me. Invisible, insignificant me. And I had no idea how to be what he needed. After the council dismissed us, I finally spoke. You're destroying yourself for this. For me, no. We walked through the corridors, his hand still holding mine in a possessive grip that made palace inhabitants scatter from our path. I'm building something real for the first time since I took this crown. Can't you see that? I see you risking everything. Elise. He stopped, pulling me into an alcove away from prying eyes. Do you regret it? Choosing me? No, I admitted, but I'm terrified. I don't know how to be queen. I don't know how to navigate court politics or speak to nobility or... You'll learn. His thumb traced circles on my wrist. And in the meantime, just be yourself. That's all I need. But being myself felt impossible when the entire palace watched my every move, waiting for me to fail. 3 weeks after the selection ceremony, I discovered why King Rowan had been so certain, so possessive, so absolute in his claim. I'd been feeling strange for days, dizzy in the mornings, exhausted despite sleeping well, unusually sensitive to smells. I'd attributed it to stress, to the overwhelming changes in my life. But when I fainted during a fitting for my coronation gown, the royal physician was summoned. Dr. Matthias examined me with clinical efficiency, asked pointed questions, and then delivered news that made the world tilt sideways again. You're pregnant, my lady. About 3 weeks along, I'd estimate. The room spun. That's not possible. I stopped, heat flooding my face. Once is all it takes, particularly during a heat cycle. He regarded me with something almost like sympathy. Did you not realize you were entering heat that night? I hadn't. I'd been so focused on King Rowan, on the impossibility of what we were doing, that I hadn't noticed my body's signals. But looking back, the signs had been there, the heightened sensitivity, the overwhelming attraction, the biological imperative that had made saying no feel impossible. Does the king know? I whispered. Not yet. Patient confidentiality dictates you have the right to tell him yourself. Dr. Matthias packed his instruments. Though I suspect this news will complicate an already complex situation. Complicate. That was one word for it. I spent the afternoon in my chambers, hands pressed against my still flat stomach, mind racing. A child. King Rowan's child. The heir everyone kept demanding he produce. Had he known? That night when he'd asked for one real thing, had he understood what he was risking, or had he been as lost in the moment as I was? The door opened without warning. King Rowan entered, his expression thunderous. Dr. Matthias informed me you fainted. Are you? He stopped, seeing my face. What's wrong? I need to ask you something. My voice came out steadier than I felt. And I need you to answer honestly, always. That night, the night before the selection ceremony, I met his eyes, searching for truth. Did you know I was going into heat? Something flickered across his features. Guilt, resignation, defiance all mixed together. He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. You knew, I breathed. You knew and you didn't tell me. Yes. No excuses, no justifications, just that single word. Why? The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Why would you? Because I wanted you bound to me in every way possible. He crossed to me, his movements predatory again, that alpha dominance rising to the surface. Because the council would never accept you as queen without an heir to justify the choice. Because I needed them to have no option but to accept us. You used me. My voice broke. You manipulated my biology to trap me. I claimed you, he corrected, voice dropping to that dangerous register. There's a difference. And before you damn me completely, ask yourself this. Would you have chosen differently if you'd known? Would you have walked away from that night? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to be angry. To feel violated. To rage at his presumption, but the truth was more complicated. I don't know, I admitted. But I deserved the choice. You're right. He cupped my face, his touch gentle despite the fierce emotion in his eyes. You deserved honesty. You deserved agency. And I took both from you because I was terrified of losing the one real thing in my life. I won't apologize for wanting you, Elise. But I am sorry for how I went about claiming you. I'm pregnant, I said, needing him to hear it from me. 3 weeks. I know, Dr. Matthias told me. His hand slid down to rest against my stomach, possessive and protective. My child, our child, growing inside you. You planned this? All of it? Yes. Still no excuses. From the moment I realized you were going into heat, I knew what would happen, and I made sure it did. The manipulation should have enraged me. But beneath the betrayal, I felt something else. A dark, twisted understanding of his desperation. He'd been as trapped as I was, just in a different kind of cage. And he'd found a way to break us both free, even if the method was morally questionable. The title, I said slowly, understanding dawning. You're not making me queen because you love me. You're doing it because I'm carrying the heir. No, his voice turned fierce. I'm making you queen because you're mine. The child just gives the council no choice but to accept it. There's a difference, Elise. Is there? I pulled away from his touch. How do I know any of this is real? How do I know you didn't just see a convenient maid to manipulate into producing your heir? Pain flashed across his features. You think I'd put my entire reign at risk? Alienate every noble family and incite potential rebellion for mere convenience? I could have chosen any of those Omega candidates and had a legitimate heir within the year. Then why me? Because you see me. The words exploded from him. Because when you look at me, you don't see the crown or the power or the bloodline. You see Rowan. Just Rowan. And that night, in the darkness, you gave me something I'd never had. The freedom to be human instead of king. Silence stretched between us, heavy with words unsaid. I'm furious with you, I said finally, for taking my choice, for manipulating my biology, for making decisions about my life without consulting me. I know. But I'm also... I pressed my hand over his where it still rested against my stomach. I'm also terrified, and overwhelmed and somehow, impossibly still here, still choosing you, even knowing what you did. His eyes closed briefly. I don't deserve you. No, I agreed. You probably don't. But apparently we're bound together now. Permanently. Forever, he corrected, pulling me close. You're mine forever now, Elise, mother of my child, my queen, my choice. Your trap, I whispered against his chest. My salvation, he countered. There's a difference. And despite everything, the manipulation, the betrayal, the impossible situation, I found myself believing him. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The council would fight this. The noble families would scheme. The kingdom would judge. But in that moment, with his arms around me and his child growing inside me, I made a choice of my own. I would be queen. Not because he'd trapped me, but because I refused to be anyone's victim. Not even his. If I was going to survive this impossible situation, I would do it on my terms, even if I had to learn what those terms were. One terrifying day at a time. Bloco 4. The announcement of my pregnancy sent shockwaves through the palace that made the initial scandal seem like a gentle ripple. Within hours, the news had spread beyond the palace walls. By morning, the entire capital knew that their king had not only chosen a common maid as queen, but had already secured an heir through her. The reaction was divided, to put it mildly. Half the population saw it as romantic, a fairy tale love story of a powerful king falling for an ordinary girl. Street vendors began selling poorly drawn illustrations of us, and I heard whispers of songs being composed about the king and his chosen dove. The other half saw it as a disgrace. Pamphlets appeared overnight questioning the legitimacy of the heir, suggesting I'd seduced the king through witchcraft or manipulation, calling for my removal from court. Someone even threw rotten vegetables at my carriage when I ventured into the city for a scheduled charity appearance. I'd returned to the palace with tomato seeds in my hair and tears burning behind my eyes. trying desperately to maintain the composure expected of a queen-to-be. "They hate me," I'd whispered to King Rowan that night, as he carefully cleaned the remnants of produce from my hair. We were in his private chambers, our chambers now, though I still felt like an intruder. "They fear change," he corrected gently, "and you represent the biggest change this kingdom has seen in generations. Give them time. What if time isn't enough? What if I'm not enough?" His hand stilled in my hair. "You are everything, Elise. Don't let their fear convince you otherwise." But their fear was contagious. I felt it seeping into my bones, making me question every word, every gesture, every decision. How could I be queen when I didn't even know which fork to use at formal dinners? How could I command respect when I'd been scrubbing floors months ago? The palace staff didn't help. My former colleagues now treated me with cold formality, resentful of my sudden elevation. The noble-born servants, the ones who'd always had authority over me, barely concealed their contempt. Only a few showed genuine kindness, and even that felt suspect, as if they were calculating what favor they might gain from befriending the king's unusual choice. Then there was Lady Serena. Of all the spurned Omega candidates, she'd taken the rejection worst. Where others had retreated to their family estates to lick their wounds, Lady Serena had remained at court, her presence a constant reminder of what King Rowan could have chosen. She was everything I wasn't: educated, refined, politically connected, beautiful in that devastating way that made men stumble over their words. Her midnight hair fell in perfect waves. Her movements possessed an innate grace I could never replicate, and her sharp mind could dissect political situations with surgical precision. I encountered her in the East Garden 3 weeks after the pregnancy announcement. I'd been seeking solitude among the roses, my morning sickness making me nauseous and my growing anxiety about the upcoming coronation making it worse. "So, this is where you hide," Lady Serena's voice cut through my contemplation. She approached with deliberate slowness, her crimson gown making her look like a bloodstain against the garden's greenery, the future queen, cowering among flowers. "Lady Serena," I straightened, trying to channel the authority I didn't feel. "I wasn't hiding, just taking air." "Of course." Her smile was all edges. "Though I suppose the palace must feel suffocating for someone of your background. All those rules, all those expectations, so different from carrying buckets and washing linens." The barb hit its mark, but I refused to flinch. "Did you need something, my lady? Need? No, want? Perhaps." She circled me slowly, like a predator assessing prey. "I want to understand what he sees in you. What possible quality you possess that I lack. I don't. Don't be modest. It's unbecoming." She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "You must have something. Some trick, some skill in the bedroom perhaps that made him lose his senses so completely." Heat flooded my face. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" Her laugh was brittle. "How dare you is the better question. You've taken something that wasn't yours, climbed far above your station, and now carry a child that will inherit a throne you have no right to influence." "King Rowan chose me," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "That's all the right I need. He used you." The venom in her words made me step back. "Can't you see that? You were convenient, malleable, easy to control because you have nothing. No family to interfere, no political connections to complicate things, no understanding of court politics to question his decisions. You're the perfect puppet queen. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me, Elise. May I call you Elise, since we're being so informal? Did he tell you he was in negotiations with my family for an alliance marriage? That choosing me would have secured the Northern Territories and brought significant military advantage? Did he explain what he sacrificed politically to bed a servant girl? I hadn't known. The information hit like a physical blow. Lady Serena saw my reaction and smiled triumphantly. Of course he didn't. Because if you understood the true cost of this little fairy tale, you might realize you're not the prize. You're the consolation. Lady Serena, that's quite enough. A new voice interrupted, sharp, feminine, and carrying clear authority. We both turned to find Lady Cordelia, the council member, standing at the garden entrance. She was older, perhaps 50, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. The future queen doesn't need to justify herself to you, Lady Cordelia continued, approaching us. Especially not in her own garden. I was merely attempting to undermine Her Majesty to be through insinuation and spite. Yes, I heard. Lady Cordelia's expression remained neutral, but her tone could have cut glass. Perhaps you should redirect that energy toward finding your own path forward rather than sabotaging hers. Lady Serena's composure cracked briefly, revealing genuine hurt beneath the venom. He was supposed to choose me. I prepared my entire life for this role. And yet he didn't choose you, Lady Cordelia said, not unkindly. That must be painful, but taking that pain out on Elise won't change the king's decision or earn back his regard. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Lady Serena. Almost. Then she looked at me with such pure hatred that any sympathy evaporated. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "The coronation is in 2 weeks. A lot can happen in 2 weeks." She swept from the garden, leaving me shaking and Lady Cordelia watching with calculating eyes. "Don't let her frighten you," Lady Cordelia said after a moment. "She has no real power here. She has more than I do," I said bitterly. "She understands this world. I'm just stumbling through it. Understanding and belonging are different things." Lady Cordelia gestured to a nearby bench, and we sat together. Lady Serena understands court politics because she was raised to manipulate them. But you, Elise, you have something far more valuable. What's that? The king's genuine affection, his trust, his willingness to risk everything for you. She studied me closely. Do you know how rare that is? How many rulers marry for alliance, for duty, for political gain, and never once feel what King Rowan clearly feels for you? He manipulated me, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He got me pregnant on purpose, to force the council's hand. Yes, I know. Lady Cordelia's matter-of-fact tone surprised me. The timing was rather obvious to anyone paying attention. But tell me, do you believe he did it out of callous political calculation, or out of desperation to keep the one person who makes him feel human? I didn't answer immediately. The question cut too close to truths I was still processing. Both, perhaps, I admitted finally. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse. It makes it real, Lady Cordelia said. Messy, complicated, imperfect, but real. And reality, my dear, is what this court has been lacking for far too long. Everyone here wears masks, plays roles, performs for advantage. You're the first honest thing to enter these halls in decades. I'm not trying to be honest. I'm just trying to survive. Exactly. She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her austere features. And that honesty, that vulnerability, is precisely why he chose you. Why you might actually make a remarkable queen, despite having no training for it. I don't see how... The greatest queens in our history weren't those born to the role, Lady Cordelia interrupted. They were those who learned it through necessity, who brought fresh perspectives because they weren't constrained by tradition, who ruled with compassion because they remembered what it meant to struggle. You have that potential, Elise, if you're brave enough to embrace it. Her words planted a seed of something dangerous in my chest. Hope. Why are you helping me? I asked. The rest of the council wants me gone. The rest of the council are fools who can't see past their own noses. She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her skirts. I've served 4 monarchs, watched 3 coronations, and advised more foolish decisions than I care to count. But I've never seen a king look at anyone the way Rowan looks at you. That kind of devotion is either this kingdom's salvation or its downfall. I'd rather see it be the former. She left me there among the roses, mind spinning with possibilities I'd been too afraid to consider. Maybe I didn't need to be Lady Serena. Maybe I didn't need to pretend to be something I wasn't. Maybe I just needed to survive long enough to figure out what kind of queen I could actually be. The lessons began the next day. Lady Cordelia arrived at my chambers at dawn with a stack of books, several patient tutors, and a schedule that made my head spin. History, protocol, politics, languages, economics, military strategy. Subjects I'd never imagined needing suddenly became my entire existence. You have 2 weeks until the coronation, Lady Cordelia informed me. It's not enough time to make you a perfect queen, but it's enough to make you a competent one. If you're willing to work. I was willing. Desperate, actually. We worked 12-hour days. I memorized noble lineages until my head ached, practiced proper forms of address until my tongue felt twisted, studied historical treaties until the words blurred together. At night, King Rowan would find me surrounded by books, circles under my eyes, hand cramping from note-taking. "You're going to exhaust yourself," he'd say, pulling me away from the desk and into his arms. "I have to learn," I'd insist. "I have to prove I can do this." "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do. To them. To myself. I'd stopped, but he'd understood anyway. "To me?" He'd tipped my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Elise, I chose you. Not the queen you might become, but the woman you already are. You don't need to transform yourself into something else. I need to be worthy of what you've given me." "You already are." But he'd let me continue studying anyway, understanding that I needed this. Needed to feel some control in a situation where I'd had so little. The pregnancy complicated everything. Morning sickness struck at inopportune moments. During a lesson on trade agreements, in the middle of a fitting for my coronation gown, once memorably during a dinner with minor nobility that I'd barely made it through. My body was changing in ways that felt both miraculous and terrifying, and I was acutely aware that every change was visible evidence of what King Rowan had done. "Doctor." Matthias examined me weekly, declaring the pregnancy progressing normally, though he cautioned about stress levels. "The first trimester is delicate, Your Majesty. You need rest." But rest felt impossible with the coronation looming. 5 days before the ceremony, I encountered Lord Garrett in the corridor outside the council chamber. He'd been avoiding me since the announcement, communicating through intermediaries whenever possible. But now we were alone, and his contempt was palpable. "You know this won't last," he said without preamble. "The king's infatuation will fade. And when it does, you'll be left with a crown you can't wear, and a child whose legitimacy will always be questioned." "Is that a threat, Lord Garrett?" "It's a fact. The noble families are already plotting. They see weakness in the king's choice, opportunity in your inexperience. How long do you think it will take before someone decides the kingdom would be better served with you?" Removed from the picture, fear lanced through me, cold and sharp. "You can't." "I can't, but others might. Accidents happen, even in palaces, especially to pregnant women who don't have family or connections to avenge them." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Walk away now, while you still can. Take a generous settlement, disappear into anonymity, and let the king choose appropriately. It's the only way you survive this. I won't abandon him. Then you're a fool. And fools don't live long in places like this." He walked away, leaving me trembling in the empty corridor. That night, I told King Rowan everything. His rage was immediate and volcanic. "I'll have him removed from the council. Exiled. No," I caught his arm. "That will only prove his point, that I'm a weakness he can exploit to control you." "Then what do you suggest?" I thought of Lady Cordelia's words. About fresh perspectives. About not being constrained by tradition. "I suggest we stop playing by their rules," I said slowly. "The nobility expects me to fail, because they think I'm just a pawn in your game. So we show them I'm not. We make me visible, undeniable. We give them a queen they can't ignore or dismiss. How? I don't know yet." I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling the barely there curve of life growing inside me. "But I have 5 days to figure it out. And I'm not going to spend them hiding or apologizing for existing." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, admiration, fierce possessive joy all mixed together. "There she is," he murmured, pulling me close. "My queen. Not the one they expected. The one they need." "I'm terrified," I admitted against his chest. "Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. But don't let it paralyze you." His hand covered mine on my stomach. "You're not alone in this, Elise. You're mine. And I protect what's mine, even from your own counsel, especially there in the darkness of his chambers. 2 people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances, bound by biology and choice, and something that might have been love if we'd had time to nurture it properly. The coronation was 5 days away. Whatever was coming, we'd face it together, even if neither of us knew if we'd survive it. The morning of the coronation dawned cold and clear, the kind of crystalline winter day that made everything feel sharp-edged and precarious. I stood before the mirror in my chambers while attendants fussed with my gown, an elaborate creation of ivory silk and silver embroidery that had taken a team of seamstresses 2 weeks to complete. The dress was beautiful, undeniably so, but it felt like armor. Heavy, constraining, a costume for a role I still wasn't sure I could play. "You look like a queen," Lady Cordelia said from the doorway. She'd come to check on me, as she had every morning for the past 2 weeks. I look like a girl playing dress-up, I corrected, watching my reflection with critical eyes. My pale hair had been styled into an elaborate updo, woven with pearls and tiny silver flowers. Cosmetics softened my features, made me look older, more regal. But underneath it all, I was still just Elise, the maid who'd polished staircases and made herself invisible. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Lady Cordelia approached, adjusting a fold in my sleeve. Every queen starts as a girl playing dress-up. The difference is whether she grows into the role or lets it swallow her whole. What if I get swallowed? Then Rowan will dive in after you and drag you back out. She smiled. That boy is completely besotted. It's actually rather touching, if you ignore the political catastrophe it's caused. Despite my nerves, I laughed. Is that your official council assessment? My official assessment is that you've learned more in 2 weeks than most noble-born women absorb in a lifetime. You're smart, resilient, and genuinely kind. Qualities this kingdom desperately needs. Her expression sobered. But kindness won't protect you from what's coming. You need to be ready. Ready for what? For them to test you, today, during the ceremony. She met my eyes in the mirror. There are factions who won't accept this coronation, who see it as their last chance to prevent what they view as a disastrous mistake. Watch for Lord Garrett and his allies. They'll try something. Fear coiled in my stomach, making the morning sickness worse. What kind of something? I don't know. But they'll want to humiliate you publicly, force Rowan to reconsider, or at minimum prove you're unfit for the crown. Lady Cordelia's hand squeezed my shoulder. Don't let them. Whatever happens, keep your composure. Show them the woman Rowan sees, not the frightened girl they expect. A knock at the door announced it was time. My heart hammered as attendants draped me in the ceremonial cloak, heavy velvet the color of midnight, lined with ermine, trailing behind me like a river of shadows. King Rowan waited in the corridor, already dressed in his ceremonial regalia. When he saw me, his expression transformed into something that made my breath catch. You're magnificent, he breathed. I'm terrified. That too. He offered his arm. But we're terrified together. That has to count for something. The walk to the throne room felt endless. Every step echoed. Every whisper from servants and nobles lining our path felt like judgment. I kept my chin up, my expression neutral, channeling every lesson Lady Cordelia had drilled into me. A queen doesn't flinch. A queen doesn't apologize for existing. A queen commands the space she occupies. The throne room doors opened, and sound washed over us. Hundreds of voices, the rustle of expensive fabrics, the weight of collective attention. Every noble family in the kingdom had come. Some to witness history, others to watch me fail. The ceremony began with traditional blessings, ancient words in a language I'd studied but barely understood. The high priest droned on about divine right and sacred duty while I knelt on the cold marble, King Rowan beside me, both of us awaiting the moment when the crown would be placed on my head. Then Lord Garrett stepped forward. "Before we proceed," he announced, his voice carrying across the sudden silence, "the council has questions that must be addressed regarding the legitimacy of this coronation." My stomach dropped. Beside me, King Rowan tensed. "The ceremony is not the place for council business," the high priest objected. "This concerns the very foundation of the ceremony," Lord Garrett continued. "We have received testimony suggesting that Elise Thorne used manipulation, possibly even forbidden herbs or potions, to ensnare His Majesty's affections and engineer her current condition." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt blood drain from my face. "These are serious accusations," Lord Garrett pressed. "Before we crown this woman queen, before we accept her child as legitimate heir, we must investigate." "Enough." King Rowan stood, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You dare interrupt this sacred ceremony with baseless accusations?" "They're not baseless, Your Majesty. We have a witness. Let me guess. Lady Serena?" King Rowan's laugh was cold. "A spurned candidate with every reason to lie? That's your evidence?" She claims to have seen Elise purchasing suspicious herbs from an apothecary in the lower city. "I was buying ginger root." My voice surprised me. Steady, clear, carrying across the throne room. I stood slowly, facing Lord Garrett directly. "For morning sickness, which Dr. Matthias recommended." which anyone could verify if they bothered to check instead of concocting elaborate conspiracy theories. Murmurs spread through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical. "You expect us to believe," Lord Garrett started. "I expect you to do your job with integrity, instead of political sabotage." The words flowed from me with unexpected confidence. "You claim to care about the kingdom's welfare, Lord Garrett, but all I see is a man desperate to maintain power by undermining a king who won't be controlled." His face purpled. "How dare you? How dare I speak truth?" I took a step forward, channeling every ounce of courage I possessed. "I'm a maid, a nobody from nowhere, elevated far beyond what anyone expected. And yes, that terrifies me. But it terrifies you more, doesn't it? Because if someone like me can become queen, it means your carefully maintained hierarchies aren't as absolute as you pretend. It means change is possible. It means you might be replaced too." Silence stretched, heavy and electric. "I didn't seduce the king with potions or manipulation," I continued, my voice ringing through the hall. "I loved him honestly. I chose him freely. And yes, I carry his child. A child conceived in love, not conspiracy. If that's not legitimate enough for you, then perhaps the problem isn't my worthiness. Perhaps it's your inability to imagine a different kind of queen." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lady Cordelia began to clap, a slow, deliberate sound that echoed through the throne room. Others joined her. First a handful, then dozens, then hundreds. The applause built like a wave, drowning out Lord Garrett's protests. King Rowan's hand found mine, squeezing with fierce pride. "Any other objections?" the high priest asked dryly when the applause finally faded. "Or may we proceed with the actual coronation?" Lord Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but the moment had shifted. Whatever power he'd hoped to wield had evaporated in the face of my unexpected defiance. He stepped back, defeated. The ceremony continued. The crown was placed on my head, lighter than I'd expected, yet somehow heavier with everything it represented. Words were spoken, vows were taken, and when it was done, I was no longer Elise Thorne the maid. I was Elise Ashford, queen of the realm, mother-to-be of the heir, wife to a king who'd risked everything for me. The coronation feast was a blur of faces and congratulations. Noble families who'd scorned me now offered careful respect, recalculating their positions now that my crown was undeniable. Lady Serena appeared briefly, her face a mask of composed fury, before disappearing into the crowd, but not everyone was hostile. Common people, servants, merchants, craftspeople who'd been allowed into the outer halls, cheered genuinely when they saw me. To them, I was proof that elevation was possible, that the rigid hierarchies could be challenged. "You were incredible," King Rowan murmured, during a rare quiet moment, his arm around my waist as we stood on the balcony overlooking the celebrating crowds. "The way you faced down Garrett, I've never been more proud." "I was making it up as I went," I admitted. "The best leaders usually are." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "You're going to be an extraordinary queen, Elise. Not despite where you came from, but because of it. I hope you're right." "I am." His hand moved to rest on my stomach where our child grew. "And when our daughter is born..." "Daughter?" I looked up at him. "How do you know?" "Intuition. Alpha intuition." He grinned. "She'll grow up knowing she can be anything." Because her mother proved that origin doesn't determine destiny, I leaned into him, letting the warmth of his body and the joy of the crowd below wash over me. It wouldn't be easy. Lord Garrett and his faction would continue plotting. Lady Serena would nurse her wounds and likely return with new schemes. The noble families would test me at every turn. But I'd survived the coronation. I'd found my voice. And I had allies. Lady Cordelia, the common people, and most importantly, the king who'd chosen me. 7 months later, I gave birth to a daughter exactly as King Rowan had predicted. We named her Petra, meaning rock, foundation, strength. She had my pale hair and her father's amber eyes, and from her first breath, she commanded every room she entered with the natural authority of someone born to rule. Lord Garrett retired from the council 3 months after her birth, his influence finally broken. Lady Serena married a northern lord and left court, though rumor said she watched from afar with mixed feelings, hatred and grudging respect in equal measure. Lady Cordelia became my closest advisor, and Petra's honorary grandmother, teaching us both how to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics with wit and wisdom. And King Rowan, he remained exactly what he'd been from the beginning. Possessive, protective, occasionally infuriating, but genuinely devoted. Not perfect, but real. On quiet nights, after Petra was asleep and the palace had settled into darkness, we'd return to that staircase where everything had begun, where he'd first asked my name and I'd first felt seen. "Do you regret it?" he asked once, holding me close. "The trap I set? The choice I took from you? Every day," I admitted. "And not at all. Both things are true. That's very diplomatic of you, Your Majesty." I learned from the best. I tilted my face up to kiss him. "Besides, if you hadn't trapped me, I might never have discovered I could be this, that I could survive court politics and childbirth and transform from invisible to undeniable. You were always undeniable. I just made sure everyone else could see it too. Is that what you're calling manipulation now?" "I'm calling it destiny." His arms tightened around me. "Mine forever, remember? That's what I told you. And I chose you back," I reminded him. "That's what matters. Not how it started, but how we continued." Below us, the palace slept. Above us, stars wheeled through an infinite sky, and between us, the life we'd built from impossible circumstances, messy, complicated, hard-won, but undeniably ours. I'd been a maid who made herself invisible. Now I was a queen who refused to disappear. And that transformation, painful, terrifying, glorious, was the truest magic I'd ever known. The fairy tale they'd tell in future years would simplify it, would make it romantic and clean, erasing the manipulation and fear and desperate choices. But I would remember the truth, would teach it to Petra when she was old enough to understand that real love isn't found in perfection. It's built in the spaces between betrayal and forgiveness, between fear and courage, between who you were and who you choose to become. That queens aren't born, they're forged in fire and crowned in defiance. That sometimes the greatest trap is also the greatest liberation, and that forever isn't a promise someone makes to you. It's a choice you make every single day. I chose forever, and finally, impossibly, I was free.